it feels weird in the midst of war, right? In the midst of killing innocent children in Gaza, with death tolls rising, as I hear about more airstrikes, and I hear this war will be long. It feels weird in the face of another mass shooting just in the state to our north. It feels weird in light of the world we live in to talk about zombies, something that seems so silly, so trivial compared to what the world is going through now. And yet, Carrie Ryan, author of our reading, and so many others have drawn connections between zombies and the horrors, the real horrors of our world. So maybe it's the perfect time to talk about this, to ask why we are drawn to horror, to images of brain-dead, soulless zombies, when there's a horror movie literally happening in the Middle East, when there's a horror movie happening here at home. Why don blood-soaked clothes and make light of the terror that people really go through? Why? Now first, I have a confession. I haven't really been a huge fan of horror movies or zombies. I particularly struggle with gore. I read the Walking Dead comic books, which are in black and white, so not too bloody. But I've never watched the show. I tried to play the Last of Us video game and found it too gruesome. The closest I've come to enjoying zombie fiction is watching the Borg on Star Trek. A kind of space zombie. No, really, they are. If you watch Star Trek, they're space zombies. People that become infected and become cyborgs and lose their sense of self, just in a much less gory way. And I will tell you that these zombies are absolutely terrifying without the gore, and I love them. Because I find the idea of zombies fascinating, and I was excited to explore what makes them so appealing to so many people. And weirdly, the older I get, the more interested in horror I've become. The more horrific things I experience, the more I get this urge almost to recreate that strange feeling in my stomach in a controlled environment. So I wonder why we, the collective United States, if that can be called something, why we, the public, are so into zombies in particular. Let's start with some history. Unlike a lot of horror monsters that are part of our cultural story, such as vampires and werewolves, zombies don't have the same European origin, though there are some examples of zombie-like descriptions in the Bible, such as Zechariah 14:12-13. This shall be the plague with which the Lord will strike all the people who wage war against Jerusalem. Their flesh shall rot while they are still on their feet. Their eyes shall rot in their sockets, and their tongues shall rot in their mouths. On that day, a great panic from the Lord shall fall on them, so that each will seize the hand of a neighbor, and the hand of the one will be raised against the hand of another. Rotting on flesh on your feet? This kind of sounds like zombies. And then, of course, there's zombie Jesus. Right after Jesus dies on the cross, he returns, and one of his disciples, known as Doubting Thomas, doesn't believe that he could really be resurrected. He says, unless I put my hands in his wounds, I won't believe. Then Jesus comes in with his bloody nail wounds and says, hey, I'm here, you can put your hand in my wound. That is creepy and gross. But the modern zombie that we hear about are most influenced by Haitian folklore, from the syncretic faith of voodoo. Now, Haiti is a country that at one time had 90% enslaved West Africans and about 10% French Catholics, and who were the enslavers. So voodoo is a combination of elements, Haitian voodoo, of Catholicism of the French that the enslaved were forced to convert to, and the West African religion that many enslaved brought with them. Religions. Voodoo is something that is mocked and vilified here in the United States in, frankly, a pretty racist way, as if other faiths don't have superstitions, even our own. It is noteworthy that Haiti is the location of the only successful slave revolt, where the enslaved population came together in the late 18th century and overthrew their enslavers to create the first black-led republic in the Western world. The revolt caused fears to rise all throughout the West that the enslaved would do this in other Caribbean colonies as well as in the United States. The zombie of Haitian voodoo describes a walking corpse, the product of evil magic employed by a dark priest called a bokor. The zombie is brought back as a mindless slave to work in the field. This has some interesting connotations for a country where the vast majority of the population was enslaved. And apparently this was used by enslavers to scare the enslaved into working, because that means that even in death, you cannot escape slavery. The word itself is of unknown and possibly interesting origins. Christopher Moorman and Corey James Rustin describe in their book Race, Oppression, and the Zombie the possible places this could have come from. Perhaps it's from a West African word, zumbi, meaning fetish, or nzambi, meaning spirit of God. Or perhaps from the French language of their colonizers, sans vie, meaning without life. Perhaps particularly fitting when taken in the context of the idea of a body without life and the connection to this experience of being enslaved. Professor Amy Wilson from the University of California claims even that for the enslaved in Haiti, suicide was the enslaved's only way to take control of their own body, and yet the fear of becoming a zombie might stop them from doing so. The final rest in green, leafy, heavenly Africa, with no sugarcane to cut and no master to appease or serve, is unavailable to the zombie. To become a zombie was the enslaved's worst nightmare. To be dead and still be enslaved, an eternal field hand. So this was a way in which those who were the enslavers used their folklore against them. And if you think about our modern zombie as mindless and without control over the own body, it remains a possible metaphor for slavery. Certainly the Borg are. Now, I didn't know a lot of this history before I began studying for this sermon, and it's caused me to wonder what is appropriate in terms of our usage of the zombie in popular American culture. How did the zombie go from being a voodoo concept in Haiti to what we see now in zombie horror movies? The American occupation in Haiti in the early 20th century is what brought the idea of zombies here. The first zombie movie titled fittingly, The White Zombie, came out, sorry, it's just so ridiculous, right? Came out in 1932, just a few years before this occupation ended. And it depicts a white woman who goes to Haiti, and she's turned into a zombie, which I can't help but see as the fear of what black people might do to white women, a fear that has permeated American culture. Most early American zombie movies depicted the zombies as only black, perhaps putting the fear of the other, the uncivilized Haitians, as the literal zombies. Perhaps this movie, White Zombie, speaks to the fears of white America to become as oppressed as those who are black. The real explosion of the zombie in American culture didn't truly come until 1968, with multiracial zombies in The Night of the Living Dead, directed by George Romero. A film that, at the time, turned the racial theme on its head by casting black actor Dwayne Jones as the hero of the story, right? This is in 1968, so you can see the context there. And many drew a connection between the fight for civil rights against the zombies of white supremacy. It's like kind of turned the whole thing around. And so began the connection between zombies in America, American culture, and real-life issues, anxieties, and fears. And the obsession of ever-increasing media depicting zombies that would include countless movies, video games, novels, comic books, Romero created the zombie as we know it today, that follows these characteristics. Zombies of the dead come back to life. Zombies feed on the living. Anyone bitten by a zombie becomes a zombie, and the only way to kill a zombie is to shoot it in the head. All other zombie films loosely follow these conventions. So what's compelling about zombies anyway, about a monster that follows these rules? The zombies of modern fiction are an embodiment of our fear of conformity, of resurrection from the dead, our fears about pandemics, both of thought and real infections, of getting bit by something that might force us to follow something we don't believe, of enslavement in the worst way possible, our fears of survival, of us versus them, of dehumanizing an enemy, of making it easier to kill those who are different from us, of being alive but losing your soul, of having to fight someone you love because they've been taken or are infected. They embody our American fear of the dead in a way that many other cultures don't necessarily experience. Take the Mexican Day of the Dead, or Dia de los Muertos, a holiday that celebrates those connections to the dead, the relationship that continues. Or the Haitian practice of having a dead relative attend something and imagining that they are someone to talk to. Pagan practices even see this time of the year, Samhain, as the most sacred, a time when the veil between the living and the dead is thin, a sacred moment of connection to our ancestors. So what does it mean when our reanimation of the dead most often comes in this fear-filled idea of our loved ones' bodies being controlled, gray and bloodied, coming after us not as friendly apparitions but soulless monsters? American culture often sees the dead as separate from us. We push it away as far as possible. So perhaps horror movies is one of the only ways that we can connect with our fear of it. And yet another question is why we like to be scared in this way at all. At a base level, a lot of people like horror movies. Not everyone. Who here likes horror movies, out of curiosity? Okay, you're slowly coming out of the woodwork saying that you do. Enough people like them to keep making them, right? This phenomenon is called the horror paradox. Some believe that we are drawn to horror because it's a safe way for us to experience the range of human emotions. If you are frightened in a movie theater, you might squeeze your fiance's hand really hard, or cover your eyes and ask when the scene's over. But at the end, you know that you were in no real danger. You were able to experience these frightful feelings while still being safe in the end, allowing the adrenaline to work its magic without the negative consequences of it. And zombies shed light on some real existential fears that we might have. The movie Dawn of the Dead, who's seen that one, Dawn of the Dead? Okay, a few people. Of course, Arthur, he loves movies. From 1978, brings home some of our greatest fears about the world. It's set so perfectly in a suburban shopping mall. The zombie apocalypse that is happening draws parallels between our obsession with consumerism and capitalism. And the zombie horrors at the shopping mall the shopping mall is a place where people congregate, get in lines, move beyond their own power, without a soul perhaps, towards the thing that our culture deems worthy of buying. Think about the ways in which Christmas sales are groups of people just endlessly wandering shopping malls. I knew I did this as a kid, just wandering with my parents, trying to find gifts for people. And why? Because our wider culture, this consumerist culture, encourages us to buy. But we've become this horde of shoppers. We infect each other. We are the zombies in the shopping mall, right? Which leads to another core fear that zombies tap into, that we really aren't in control of our actions. Zombies are completely out of control, right? Perhaps they are compelled by wanting to eat more brains. Part of being human, being an individual, is believing that you have control over your own destiny. In a real way, however, we are not in control. Forget the arguments over free will. Our literal bodies will do things that we have no control over. How long will we have our sight or our hearing? How long will we be with or without pain? Add that to the fact that we are impacted by our cravings, our addictions, advertisements we see, the food we need, in ways that we don't even understand. And you see how a zombie personifies that in the most intense way. Zombies are also often described and represented in a way we might call mindlessness, to represent by being infected by a particular cause. I think about what's happening in Israel and Gaza, and how one side sees the other perhaps as zombies, people who have become indoctrinated by a specific ideology, right? And are acting in a way that is completely out of control and to service in whatever they believe, right? That's how we sometimes see the other side. Zombies have given us another way to dehumanize people. Have you ever heard someone talk about those who disagree with them as mindless zombies? If we believe that, then we have no problem seeing the other side as a lost cause, right? Zombies are a lost cause, like we do in a zombie movie. When somebody becomes a zombie in a movie, Be they a child, a loved one, it doesn't matter. You don't hesitate, you kill them. Is this what's happening now? Robert Card, the mass shooter in Maine, had an online footprint of anti-transgender writings online. Following and engaging with such posts as Tucker Carlson, who states, "The trans movement is the mirror image of Christianity, therefore its natural enemy." Of course, then, he might want to eliminate those zombies who have lost their Christian soul. Now, I don't begrudge anyone who likes zombie movies. There's something powerful about the fear, the adrenaline, the catharsis, the people banding together to help one another. But I think we need to be aware of both the history of zombies and how this concept can be used to other those who are different from us and believe they are unworthy of life. A zombie apocalypse is not at our doorstep, despite what we might feel. So let us use these concepts to live through this fear, to find safe ways to express those parts of us that need that. And many of us need that, a release valve for our fear. But let's also remember that it's not real. There are no zombies in this world, only humans who make mistakes, who find themselves on the wrong side of the border, and are living their lives the best way they know how. So let us remember it's our duty to love one another, bring peace to one another, and to see each other's humanity, because there are no real zombies. May it be so. Let us say together, Amen. Amen.